Howdy, y'all. Welcome to the EEARSS Podcast, produced by Terrier TV here at Titusville High School. I am Bill. I'm not actually Bill. I'm actually Frank.
You're not Bill. You're Frank. You're Frank.
Wow.
Where's my theft is a crime?
Yeah. So that's the funniest thing I've done at least in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's
and like my brain is just overwhelmed by our current guest, by the guest we just had, and just I don't know. It is what it is. Yeah. But actually, that's Bill to my left.
Yes, no, I
and
know.
That's Cindy. And this is our.
Do we know? I don't know.
Yeah,
hard saying.
I question who I actually am all the time. So yeah. I mean, right now I'm Bill.
There you go.
You guys ready to jump into our podcast?
Yes, sir.
I feel like I want to start asking our guest questions.
Yes.
Immediately, as quickly as we possibly can.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We've already kind of been in a conversation with it.
Way to not ease her in at all.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel. So today on the podcast, we are joined by Rachel Turner, a vet at the Brevard Zoo. Not a vet, but the vet at the Brevard Zoo. We won't tell Trevor we said that.
I was going to say there are two of us.
We won't tell Trevor we said that. I've known you for a while now.
Yeah.
Got to watch you guys work, watch you do the incredible stuff you're doing down there at the zoo. So tell us a little bit about you, what you do currently, and if you're like every other vet, I have this imagination that tells me every vet has the idea they're going to be a vet at 6 years old and just kind of somehow works their way there. Is there actually any truth to that? Let's start with that. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, so there definitely was for me. I have the very boring kind of traditional, straightforward story of I was the kid that was out with animals all the time. We have a family legend of when I was 3 years old and I brought a 20-pound stray cat home that was taller. He was longer than I was tall, and I had him under his armpits. And my mom was just like, oh, no.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. He lived for like 20 years. He was the best cat. So, yeah, for me, it was very much a straight trajectory. But for a lot of people, it is a really winding road. I had a lot of classmates in vet school that came. It was second, third careers, or it was something that they found. I had a classmate who was a music performance major and played the oboe, was really exceptional at the oboe, got about halfway through undergrad and realized that was not a direction that she wanted to go in terms of her profession, and so sort of pivoted into veterinary medicine, but was still a really fantastic oboe player. So it's, the traditional kind of stereotypical story is definitely there, but there's approximately a million different ways to kind of get to, the point of being a veterinarian.
So me and you have this weird connection, which I think you knew about me before I ever knew about you, but you were involved with things that I was involved with and I never even knew about it.
Yeah.
So
it's
Rachel,
a little creepy. It's fine.
It was pretty neat. Yeah. Rachel, whenever I caught Chance in Chicago, whenever he showed up at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm, she was there giving him his health assessment with UF.
I was the receiving vet. Yeah, it was during my residency. So everybody was talking about Alligator Robb and Chance the Snapper and this big thing. And I got him. He was just a little stunted dude. And, he had probably grown up in a bathtub. So he had all sorts of, his jaw was misshapen and like all these little things. And now he's thriving, doing fabulous. But yeah.
He's a daggum. He's a big old lizard these days.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big old lizard these days. In your career, I'm sure you've worked with some amazing things.
Yeah.
Tell us, first off, what's the neatest thing you've worked with? And then let's talk about your work at the zoo and what you guys do there.
Sure. Yeah. So, the neatest thing I've worked with, it's always hard because it's,
it's a hard one to narrow down to one thing.
It's hard to narrow it down, and everybody has a different perspective on what's neat and what's interesting. I was part of a bull African elephant anesthesia event when I was at the Birmingham Zoo, which he had a fractured tusk that needed to be removed. We brought a team in from Africa for the surgery. We had probably somewhere between 10 and 15 veterinarians and about 20 veterinary technicians or veterinary nurses involved. It was a huge, huge undertaking.
Yeah, imagine putting an elephant under would be it's as crazy as it sounds like.
It's massive, yeah. So
I'm trying to imagine coordinating something so complicated among so many different personalities of professionals.
It is insane. There were so many spreadsheets. And it's one of those things, you go in with your plan all set, everybody has their role, everybody knows what they're doing. The animal goes down and everything goes out the window. And it's like, you just do what you need to do. And if you had an assigned role, you make sure it's covered and you just, you kind of pivot. And we were really fortunate. The procedure went almost exactly to plan, which is not common in big zoo procedures. Wow. So we were really, really fortunate in that scenario that it went, very, very straightforward, very much to the plan. But Yeah, it's a huge coordinated effort for sure.
When you have something like that, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so there's so many unique animals in zoos these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I always go to weird things like pangolins and stuff. How much of this, a lot of the different surgeries and different procedures you guys do, how many times do you go into something like this and it's either something that hasn't been documented, so you have nothing to pull on, or it's nothing anybody's ever done before, and you go, all right, I guess we're just going to wing this and see how it works out. I mean,
all
like
the time.
Yeah, is it all the time?
All the time. Yeah. So zoo medicine as a profession is definitely a relatively young field. And as a specialty, it's relatively young, especially compared to some of the other veterinary specialties. There's only a couple hundred boarded zoo veterinarians in the country. And probably similarly, I don't know the exact numbers for the number in the world, but a lot of what we do is extrapolated from other things. And one of the big sort of things that we're encouraged to do as boarded veterinarians is to continuously publish and go to conferences and talk about things. And it's a super, super collaborative field. We're constantly picking each other's brains and then also reaching out and working with other specialties. I always say that I'm kind of a master generalist in my field, so I can anesthetize just about anything. I can do, basic wound care, those sorts of things. But when it comes to this really specialized stuff, the really intense surgeries, really specific root canals and dental procedures and things like that, we need to bring other specialists in. So anytime that I'm prepping for a procedure, I definitely go into the literature and I read what I can. And then if I know somebody that I know has experience in something, I'll pick their brain. But there definitely is a lot of stuff that it's like, this is the first time anyone's doing this, and we'll see what happens.
So is there such a thing as like an animal dentist?
Yes.
There
Yeah.
are people
So
that do that?
veterinary dentistry is a specialty. And then within that, there are sort of sub-specialties. So small animal, large animal. And then there are a handful of people out there that have kind of made their career out of being zoo veterinary dentists. It's very, very niche. There's one professor in particular, he actually just retired from UGA recently. And so everybody's kind of scrambling now. But he was like the rhino dental guy for 30 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
So there's a lot of specialties you'd be surprised by, a lot of little niches.
Oh, I would imagine, because you guys cover such a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and then to speak to the Brevard Zoo, so we have a couple of different things that kind of come under the blanket of the Brevard Zoo. So we have the zoo itself, which is in Melbourne, and it's got a pretty broad collection, lots of reptiles, birds, some amphibians, lots of mammals, a lot of your kind of classic zoo species. And then we also have the Sea Turtle Healing Center, which is a sea turtle rehabilitation center that is adjacent, kind of connected to our veterinary hospital. And then we are currently in the process of sort of the development phase. There's going to be an aquarium called the Bowen Aquarium opening up out in Port Canaveral. There's not a predicted opening date at this point, but that is going to be a really cool project where it's very locally focused. So the idea of it is to sort of highlight our local ecosystems, the Indian River Lagoon, those sorts of areas, and really highlight those animals and those species and the conservation needs that they have and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty big facility and there's a lot going on there for sure.
Yeah, I know in the Sea Turtle Healing Center, we were talking about this before we started. We do our lab work there for our blood samples.
Yeah.
And I am completely amazed every single time I walk in that room. I'm usually I kind of look around, and you never know what's going to be in there.
Yep.
It's always it's not just sea turtles. You guys have all kinds of cool things in there all the time that you're doing surgeries on, you're pulling them back together, putting them back together.
Absolutely.
It's amazing stuff.
Yeah. Today we had 2 flamingos, we had a kangaroo. Yesterday yesterday was a lot of turtles. So yeah, you never know. I did a little frog anesthetic procedure the other day. He had an eye abnormality. So yeah, you never know what you're going to find in that hospital. And it's true. You always come in with a little bit of a cautious look on your face. Like, is it,
I do.
Is it safe?
Overly excited and very cautious. Yes.
Yes. My favorite was the day that you walked in and Laura Keats just started screaming at you. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I walked in and went, okay,
Yep.
I did not expect that. Just that's
little
like
startle.
normal. That's going to be a very enjoyable part of your job. We're knowing that every day isn't going to be necessarily structured. It's going to be different every day.
Yep. absolutely. And we do have a kind of a plan going into every day, just like big procedures. There's always a plan. We do have a preventative medicine program at the zoo. So every single animal in the zoo gets a full exam, blood work, routine diagnostics at least every 3 years. If animals have known health problems or when there's emergencies, stuff like that, sometimes it's more frequent than that. But we do sort of have a plan in place for, okay, we're going to do a wellness exam on this animal this day, that kind of stuff. But animals are animals, and we put a really big emphasis at the Brevard Zoo, and then I would just say in the zoo community at large on something, it's a phrase we use, is choice and control. So focusing on giving animals as much choice and as much control over their environment and their social grouping and their behaviors as possible. And in that, there is an inherent choice and control to make bad choices and, bother your neighbor so much that they, lose their patience and bite you, or, make a controlled decision to eat something that maybe you shouldn't and that makes you sick. So there's, lots of emergencies and other shenanigans that come up all the time. So we start the day with a plan. We don't usually end up following it.
Say you have somebody, maybe a student,
Mhm.
who is leaning that direction. Like, you know what, I want to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't know if it's large mammals or small mammals or, like we were saying earlier, primates or reptiles or what they want to do. What are some good ways that you would encourage someone to maybe narrow that process down, or would encourage them to go with or not go with veterinary medicine?
Yeah. So I am a really big advocate of kind of getting your hands dirty and getting in there and trying things. It's relatively common in the process of undergraduate training and then also veterinary school for people to be kind of surprised by what they do and don't like. The realities of a specific specialty or a specific area of practice can often be a lot different from kind of what you expect. And so especially one of the things that I know a lot of veterinary colleges are looking for when they're reviewing applications is a diverse base of experience. So, it's great if you've worked as a vet assistant at a small animal practice for 4 years, but if you worked as a vet assistant at a small animal practice and then also did some ride-alongs with an equine vet and then, also went and volunteered at a wildlife center, just really trying to kind of get that width and breadth of experience. I had a lot of classmates that were very surprised kind of by what they enjoyed, and then the things that they thought they were really going to like, that they were like, "Oh, that's definitely not for me." And I found in my kind of experience going through all of this that just you would be amazed at the opportunities that will present themselves if you just start asking. A little jingle. Computers are speaking.
Say it scared me too for a second. It's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. But yeah, there's so many opportunities and so many spaces that you can get yourself into if you just kind of show up and ask. The worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say no. But a lot of the research experience that I got in undergrad was because I just honestly cold emailed people and said, "Hey, I'm interested. This is my background. This is what I'm looking for. Do you have space?" And I did get a lot of no's. I got a lot of people that were like, "Sorry, we don't have room right now. We don't have funding." Or one of the summer research experiences that I did, it was like, "We would love to have you, but we don't have funding. Can you find a grant?" And so I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I can probably find a grant." A little bit harder nowadays, but definitely,
Yes.
reaching out and sending that email, shaking that hand, meeting that person, and just asking if people have space. You'd be shocked at, the opportunities that are available and the experiences that you can get to kind of try different things.
Yeah, I
So
try to do
cool.
that as often as I can. It's good when somebody asks if you can try to help them out for
Yeah.
sure. There's another question for you. So you said you've worked at a lot of other zoos.
A couple, yeah.
couple other zoos.
Yeah.
What were those experiences like? And did you originally know that you wanted to go into zoo medicine, or what you just knew? Hey, I want to go into veterinary medicine, but maybe not zoo medicine. Did you always have that plan?
Yeah, so I definitely always knew veterinary medicine, and I think it was probably middle school, early high school where I started figuring out that wasn't going to just be dogs and cats for me. I didn't know what zoo medicine was or that it was a field that existed, but there was a local wildlife center near where I grew up, and they had a summer internship program, and so I got plugged into that and started kind of, getting involved there and learning about wildlife and wildlife rehabilitation and conservation and all those sorts of things. And then as that kind of progressed, I started to read more and kind of learn more and realize that, zoo medicine was a field, so that by the time I was applying to undergraduate colleges, I knew that I wanted to go to a school that had a vet school and that had a vet school that had a zoo program. So I kind of knew, from the outset that was the path that I wanted to follow. But again, not everybody has that linear of a process. And for a lot of people, it is kind of, a process of discovery over time.
Was UF always your first choice?
So I actually went to school at NC State. Go Wolfpack.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was in
We've worked with NC State.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in North Carolina for 8 years. I did undergrad and vet school there. And then I had kind of a roundabout process. So I did 2 internships. Both were a year long. One was at University of Pennsylvania, and it was a small animal medicine rotating internship. So sort of the thing that they teach you is, in order to be a good zoo vet, you need to just be a good doctor. You need to learn the basics of how to work up a case, how to make a problem list, how to, prioritize diagnostics, all that sort of stuff, how to respond in emergencies, how to show up in surgeries, all of that. So that was sort of building those chops that year. And then the year after that, I did an exotic specialty internship at Tufts up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
It was very cold. I did not love that. And then I matched
that must have been some interesting animals up there too.
Yes, absolutely. So, and then I matched to a residency in zoo medicine at the University of Florida. And so that's how I ended up in Florida.
Wow,
and
you've been all over the place.
Yeah, so then
the entire East Coast.
Also,
basically all the
from
way up,
Massachusetts
all the way back down
to Florida.
Yes, it was a little bit of a shock. I had a lot of very warm clothes that immediately were put into a box, but I was happy with that. That was fine. Snow was not it for me. No, absolutely not.
And how long have you been down here now?
I have been here for a little over a year. So immediately following residency, I took a job at the Birmingham Zoo in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was there for about 2.5 years. And then the opportunity opened up here, and so I moved on down.
What was the correlation like between the Northeast and the Southeast? That has to be, it's a day and night difference.
Oh, yeah.
And what were the main things you would see up there in the Northeast? What were the main things you guys were working on?
Well, so I was working, it was a exotics, companion exotics internship. So it was a lot of pets. So rabbits, guinea pigs, ferrets,
gotcha.
Lots of parrots, those sorts of things. Some reptiles, not as many as you see in Florida. You definitely have a larger percentage of reptile ownership down here. But yeah, so it was primarily kind of more pet exotic focused. And it was such a culture shock working with clients in Massachusetts versus working with clients and owners in Florida. And I got the feedback during the first couple of weeks of my residency. They were like, girl, you need to be nicer. Like, you need to gentle a little bit, because in Massachusetts, people are like, listen,
very direct.
Tell me what's going on. Like, do we need to treat? Do we need to euthanize? Like, let's go. Let's figure it out. How much is it going to cost? And it's like, all right, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be real. I'm going to tell you what's going on. Listen, that is not Florida. People in Florida want to tell you about their life. They want to tell you about their grandkids. Like, it is.
They want to have a podcast with you before they work on your animal, yes.
And you have to go in there real gentle and real slow. And that was definitely a transition. And figuring out how to kind of strike that balance of like, okay, we want to be gentle and we want to work a little bit slowly, but also like sometimes it's life or death. Sometimes we need to move quickly. Figuring out how to kind of strike that balance definitely has, I think, served me well working in the zoo field for sure. I
was going to say, it's got to be an interesting thing going from working with people and their animals to just working with the animals.
Yeah.
And you're not cutting all the people out of it, but you're cutting a lot of the people out of it.
Yeah. Keepers, we always say keepers are our clients. So it's similar. I definitely prefer working with keepers and curators and stuff like that. I find that they are they're just as passionate and just as connected to the animals, but they also have that piece of a little bit more kind of, a lot of times like education and background and those sorts of things. Not to say that owners aren't educated about their animals, but keepers just come at it from a different perspective. And so I really enjoy also sort of the give and take of, I have my set of skills and my knowledge, keepers come in with their set of skills and their knowledge, and working together to figure out, okay, what can we do? How do we treat these animals? And educating each other, I find to be definitely very rewarding.
We were talking earlier about the whole elephant thing made me think about that, because like we were saying, there's so many of these different procedures you guys must do that are one-offs or something that maybe only a handful of people have done, maybe you haven't ever seen published or going on.
Yeah.
It just, it adds a whole new element and a whole new idea to veterinary medicine to people that maybe they had never seen before.
Absolutely.
Stuff you should write a book about.
Yeah.
There should be a book.
Yeah, there's TV shows on it. There's some vets that I know that have gotten pretty famous on the zoo and stuff like that, because it's true. There are so many moments in my day-to-day that I'm like, this should be on television. Like, what is happening right now,
How often do you find correlations between different kinds of animals too? Like maybe you're working on some kind of a small mammal or a reptile that you find a correlation with a larger animal.
Yeah, all the time. And a lot of times we are extrapolating things. So you go back to your taxonomy and you say, okay, what is the closest relative of this species? And, can I kind of build from there? There is definitely a lot of overlap, but the more we learn and the more we study, the more we learn that there is also a lot of divergence. So, for example, with sea turtle medicine, green sea turtles metabolize almost every single drug completely differently from the way loggerheads do. So you cannot use a dose for a green turtle that you use for a loggerhead. They're totally different. It's not always. There are definitely situations where there's overlap, but a lot of the common drugs that we use, they just process them differently. And so that's part of the reason why there is this constant drive to be studying and publishing and asking these questions and trying to figure these things out, because like I said, there's so much that we just don't even know that we don't know,
So there at the Sea Turtle Healing Center, you
Mhm.
guys are working on sea turtles,
Yeah.
every different kind you could possibly think of.
Yep.
You guys have them all there. What are some of the major things you see affecting sea turtles and some of the things you guys are consistently working on?
Yeah, so we are very close to the Indian River Lagoon, and we work very closely with the Sea Turtle Preservation Society that does a lot of rescue and transport out of there. So we definitely deal a lot with sea turtles that are in a habitat that has been really impacted by the influence of humans and pollution and boating and all of those sorts of things. There's been a lot of habitat depletion and, habitat damage with the seagrass and all those sorts of things in the lagoon. So there's this subset of green turtles that we get, especially this time of year. We call them little crusty greens, and they are little juvenile green turtles that come in and they're just crusty. They usually have a lot of barnacles and they're skinny and they're dehydrated, and they're turtles that, usually they're young. And so it's, their first couple of seasons out of, trying to kind of fend for themselves, and they get behind and they get depleted. And so, they'll show up in rehabilitation. Another thing we see a lot of in this area is a disease that's called fibropapillomatosis, or FP. It is a condition where turtles will grow tumor-like masses, and they can grow all over their bodies. They can grow inside. They'll cover their eyes, their faces, their heads. And it's actually caused by a herpes virus. It's a turtle-specific herpes virus, and pretty much every sea turtle has been exposed to this virus. Most of them actually carry it, but very similar to cold sores in humans, it usually takes some sort of stressor or trigger to cause it to actually show up and cause these tumors to grow. And so because the Indian River ecosystem is so damaged, a lot of times the turtles that are coming out of there are presenting with some degree of FP. And it's not always the reason that they present. Sometimes it's just an incidental finding, but a lot of times they will come in with it covering their eyes or interfering with their ability to move their flippers. And so we take them in, get them hydrated and nourished and that sort of stuff, and then do surgery to remove kind of the bulk of the tumors.
And once you take those off, do those come back again too?
They can. The
Yeah.
hope is that we can get them to a point where they are stable enough and healthy enough, and then we can release them into a cleaner environment and they won't have that stress stimulus to regrow them. But for sure, we know that they do grow back. We can't eradicate the herpes virus. Herpes is for life, as they say. So, it's one of those really tricky conditions, and herpes viruses come up a lot in zoo medicine. There are a lot of them. Specifically, there's one in elephants that's getting a lot of attention in the field right now. And there's a lot of work being done on it. And they've fairly recently, there is a group that has developed a potential vaccine for that virus. And so that's something that in the very, very long term, sea turtle doctors and biologists are kind of dreaming of, is could we someday come up with a vaccine that would not necessarily prevent infection, but prevent that, development of those tumors or reduce the severity or something like that. So And then another thing, we do see a decent amount of interactions with humans. So fishing line entanglement, fish hook ingestion, boat strikes, those sorts of things, especially this time of year when it's super beautiful out and everybody's on the water, we definitely get a lot of those. So that's a big thing that we have to work on.
If somebody here locally encounters a sea turtle that's in trouble, what's the first thing they should do?
Yeah, so the first thing they should do, as long as the animal is not in like desperate condition and is safe, don't leave it.
Yes.
Don't touch it if you can. All over the beaches in this area, there are signs that have information. STPS, the Sea Turtle Preservation Society, has their phone number listed, and then Florida Fish and Wildlife, FWC. And both of those organizations you can call, and they will send people out to respond, evaluate the situation, pull the turtle if they need to, and transport it to a rehab center. If the turtle is in a situation where it's like this animal's going to drown or this animal's, about to be predated on or something like that, you can for sure, pull that animal. But, trying to be kind of as gentle as possible, and get them to a space that's safe, that's shaded, that people aren't going to touch or bother them. And then immediately contact those groups. A big thing we always tell fishermen is if you accidentally hook a turtle, do not cut that line. That line is how we get that hook back out. So we have plenty of really, really wonderful Good Samaritan fishermen that accidentally hook a turtle. It happens. They call right away. They say, hey, this happened. It gets transported. When it's been very quick and it's up in their esophagus and we have that line, it's super easy to get it out. The ones that are the problem are the ones that cut the line, and then we find them 2 years down the road with 6 hooks, that have migrated all over their bodies. So definitely reach out to the authorities and the professionals and get them to come and help.
Now, I know you guys have needs down there too. What are some big needs that you guys might be looking for down there, monetarily or otherwise, and how can people help?
Yeah, so we have a lot of amazing projects and amazing development that's happening at the zoo right now. The Sea Turtle Healing Center has an Amazon wish list, and they definitely also just take donations. So there's specific stuff on there. And then if you go to the Brevard Zoo website, there's a tab for the philanthropy department, and there's all sorts of programs that you can support. There's definitely a lot of fundraising still ongoing for the Bowen Aquarium. There's a group called like the Aquarium Founders Group that people can get involved with. So all the way, at that level, all the way to, we have a program at the zoo that's through the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums that's called Quarters for Conservation. And literally there's just boxes around the zoo and you drop a quarter in and all of that money is going to conservation partners that are associated. So, and absolutely.
They've helped us too. Yep.
For sure. So, everything, the highest high of donations all the way down. We also have an incredibly robust volunteer program at the zoo. It's one of the most amazing ones I've ever worked with. Last year, it was something, I think our volunteers worked something like the equivalent of like 40 full-time employees or something like that. And it ranges all the way from teenagers, there's teenage programs, all the way up to, seniors that are retired and are really passionate and spend a ton of time at the zoo. So if you or your kid or anybody that you know is interested and wants to get engaged, there's tons of opportunities. We have a group called Restore Our Shores that does a ton of really cool seagrass and oyster conservation in the lagoon. They're always looking for volunteers. And they often have weekend events. So if you're looking for like a one-off thing that you can come participate in, make a big impact, and then go on with your day, that's a really good thing to look for. So, and all of that is on our socials, our website, all of that information is available.
We'll make sure we tag all that.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks for having me.
This has been a blast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Bill, Cindy,
Yes, sir.
I think it's time to call it an afternoon.
It's an afternoon.
All right. We can do that too. I'll digress while I'm ahead of myself.
You do.
Thank
It
you
is
for
time to
not letting me down.
I have to try to digress as often as I possibly can. At least once
Fair.
per show.
That's
I didn't digress last show. Maybe
That's
I started before it with a digression.
We did.
Maybe.
Yeah.
With the identity theft, with
Yes.
the crime.
Oh,
This
yes.
is true.
Yes. It was a criminal digression.
Yes.
You're right. It was.
He's known for those.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's the reason I keep the beard, so I can get rid of it and go away from those things. Nobody will ever know. All right. Thank you all for tuning into the EEARSS podcast produced by Terrier TV here at Titusville High School. You can learn more about EEARSS at EEARSS.org.com or AlligatorRobb.com, which has 2 B's. It's my last name, not my first name. It's a whole thing. It's Alligator is not actually my middle name. It's just a thing that I enjoy working with. So if you want to learn more about us, you can go over there. And we thank you guys very much for putting up with us and tuning in and listening to Rachel's awesome story. Learn more about the Brevard Zoo over at their website, which we will tag in the description below. And we will catch you all next week. Bye-bye.